Kavita Singh Gilchrist and Raphael Williams, welcome to the conversation today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a real pleasure to be with both of you. You're joining me from New York. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today we're going to be talking about empowering resilience and nurturing motivation and self-care amid DEI challenges. Really, really important topic right now. I think it's always important. These last several years in particular have been volatile and this dialogue has been increasingly challenging, I suppose, but particularly at this very moment in time. The social and political context is challenging, shall we say, to say the least, and we need to continue to have these conversations, even though it's probably more politically charged, than it's ever been, to try to have these kind of conversations. Which, by the way, I find incredibly sad because in my mind, there's nothing about any of this that should be politically charged. I feel like this conversation is about human dignity, treating people with respect. I think everyone wants to feel valued. Everyone wants to feel needed, wanted, having the opportunity to contribute in meaningful ways. I think we all want that, and I think for the most part, we all want that for each other. But for some reason, we get caught up in culture wars and the rhetoric and all this stuff, and so then DEI gets vilified, and then we start to have corporations doing this and that and the other with their programs and boycotts and political parties and all of this stuff, right? And it just becomes this big mess. And so that's where we are at this very moment in time. And amidst that, you do all of your great work. And so I applaud you for what you continue to do, given the messy context. As we get started, and before we start this really fun conversation, I wanted to share bios with the audience. Raphael Williams serves as Senior A&D Manager for Allsteel, a leading innovator in workplace furnishings and architecture product solutions. He also serves as Equity Council Co-Chair for the International Interior Design Association's New York chapter. He aspires to educate and inform the architecture and design community on various justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion initiatives, such as Equity Council's JEDI Action Lab series. Kavita Singh Gilchrist is co-founder and managing partner of Racial Equity Partners, a national consulting practice that has helped 30 plus organizations build skills and pathways to advance racial equity, diversity, and inclusion. Before REP, she spent 20 years designing programs with education and community-based nonprofits, working to help people navigate inequitable systems by shaping inclusive services that benefit all people and positively impact their life outcomes. Kavita is also founder and director of Made for Me Books and lives in Harlem with her family. Again, pleasure to have both of you with me today. Before we launch on into the conversation, is there anything either of you would like to share by way of background, personal context?
Kavita?
Um, just that, Racial Equity Partners has been around doing this work for the last 5 years during a time where it feels really oppressed, because it's coming from our own government in so many
Yeah.
ways. And it's a tough slog, and yet resistance has always been there. Raphael and I, we've talked about that a lot through the work that we do together with the Equity Council. The resistance has always been there. It takes different shapes and forms. And it often feels for some people like it's new. So while we may need some new strategies given where it's coming from, right? It is different. It's certainly different. Resistance has always been there. And so this work has maybe it hasn't been as vilified and as blatantly kind of oppressed as it is being right now. And yet we persist. And we're excited to have this conversation, particularly around self-care, because for those of us who need to continue to advocate and will persist and continue to advocate, we need to make sure we're caring for ourselves and caring for each other in community together. So we're really excited that you wanted to have this conversation today.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
Interestingly enough, the Equity Council was founded in 2020, probably around the same time that Racial Equity Partners was developed. And we, the founding members of Equity Council, connected with Kavita and her team to help us imagine what racial equity and partnership meant within IIDA. And so when we think about the work that we're doing, we're really centering around creating just and equitable workspaces in the design industry. And you started the conversation, Dr. Westover, around talking about being vilified. As creatives, as designers, when we think about space, we look at it through the lens of if we do something exceptional for the whole, the greater good, those singled out communities will that we're focusing on now will also benefit. So just thinking about the best practice is just to do something exceptional for everybody, then we really would need to be having these conversations because good design is good as great design, you know? And so doing the next right thing is we hope inherent in everyone's DNA, but apparently doing the next right thing is not what next equitable right thing is not what everyone wants to focus on. So I too am glad that we're having this conversation so that we can get to as many voices and people around the country. So thank you for having me.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. And I'll just be open. My audience knows I'm a straight cisgender white dude. I have all the layers of privilege. But I want to be an ally. I want to be an advocate for this work. And I recognize that that despite, the 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 layers of privilege that I may have, that if one person or one group is marginalized or oppressed, that it does hurt everybody, even privileged people, like and when we help one group, we lift everybody. Like a rising tide lifts all ships. And to your
Absolutely.
point, like great design is it helps everything, helps everyone. Great equitable systems help everyone. And that's the part of this conversation when it gets, culture war politicized. That's the part that gets lost. Like I think people start to think, that somehow if you're creating more just and equitable systems, somehow you're taking away from traditionally privileged groups. And that's just not the case. I don't like if I step back and look at it, I'm like, I don't feel threatened because other groups are going to be given more equitable access. But I know other straight cisgender white dudes feel threatened, and that's part of the problem. But I think a lot of it is the rhetoric around
Mm,
it, not the reality. It's just the rhetoric, and
Yeah,
so we need to like break through the rhetoric,
yeah,
and the politicalization of it, and the culture wars, so that we can get to actual functional, productive dialogue, so we can move towards something that actually truly will benefit everybody. Like I will be better off if all of you and everyone, all groups are better off. I will have a more enjoyable life, higher level standard of living. I will have greater opportunity if everyone around me has greater opportunity. That's just a fact.
yeah.
And so it's sad, when I see others that just have this, like, I guess it's a fixed pie mentality, that they just think that they have to capture as much, of the pie as possible, and that means others have to have, as little as possible.
Yeah. There's that's right, John. It's sad and it's painful to hear because we have these like it's not as if we this is a new discussion. It isn't pie. The world isn't like that. As if there's only a certain amount of seats or a certain amount of resources to go
mm,
around. We live in the United States of America. There are plenty of resources here. We know it's about will and to get those resources to where they need. I think the best example that actually kind of connects, the design conversation to the equity conversation is the accessibility movement, right? And
Hmm.
you've probably seen articles about this where they talk about the curb cut. And when the curb cut was invented to, create a cut in the curb so that someone who moves with a wheelchair could properly navigate the streets, it ended up becoming a useful um, design that helped all kinds of folks navigate the streets better. So people who have strollers, people with their bikes,
Right.
anything with wheels, right? It ended up creating it so it was designed for a group that wasn't able to navigate the streets equitably, right? And so while the design was targeted, it ended up being for the greater good, right? And so everyone ends up using that curb cut. So it's like one of the best examples of trying to explain. You try to use analogies and parallels to folks, the naysayers, to say what is it that to try to give them, a better understanding of why this is. The other thing is when someone says I'm anti-DEI or whatever words they choose to put in there, asking them, just kind of putting it back in their lap to say, well, let's talk about, what you are you against diversity? Diversity means, and then, sharing, it's race, it's gender, it's ethnicity, it's life experience, it's
Yeah.
educational background, all these things, right? You're against having all of these different kinds and trying to get them into a conversation to really break down, because we know it's an acronym that has a lot in it. It's not one thing. Because to your point, there's a lot of rhetoric, and I think there's just a lot of, negative actors that have taken such positive work. And to your point, it feels like things are being taken away. Well, we're so far away. We've just, every decade we make some gains and then they get pulled back. If we were anywhere close to taking over in terms of people of color taking over, I would have no work to do, right? I mean, we are going into
Yeah.
places that are continue to be mostly white spaces, majority.
Right.
Let's say not mostly, but majority, right? And that's the thing. What's going on? What are the solutions that we create? And you debias the hiring process. That's what we do. We go in and we help organizations learn how to debias the process of interviewing and recruitment and things like that. So everyone has fair access. Everyone gets the same questions, right? Not just the person of color that we're hoping to increase the number of. It's a hope, but ultimately the practices are very equitable and supposed to fairly treat everyone.
Yeah,
I love that
absolutely.
you referenced the curb cut effect, because when we think about inclusive design, that we always feature that secondary effect of like all the work that people, all the different types of people that have benefited from that small tweak that was targeted for one audience. And with that, if we think about how we educate um, the masses so that we can sort of overcome so that we can effectively overcome this mis and disinformation that people are hearing about what the benefits are for the certain things that we do that to help uplift certain communities, and that they better understand that those things can and oftentimes will always assist them in their path forward. We as a whole would be so much better off. I think that as we think about all the work that we're doing and all the negative energy that keeps coming our way, we get into this constant headspace of, oh my God, what am I going to do next? What do I do? What do I do next? And how am I going to do it next? And then from a spatial standpoint, we love that we can create spaces that help you sort of disconnect from all those anxieties, because we're supporting in design, people with different physical abilities, different with
Yeah.
mental abilities, that neurodiverse population, to those that population that might be activated by some form of trauma that gets activated as they're entering a space. So this work is really magical on so many levels because it really thinks about the whole of the well-being conversation for people. And so as we think about this diversity equity and inclusion and belonging conversation, it should not be so difficult to think that what we are suggesting is something that will benefit you as a straight white man, me as a gay black man who has a white husband. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's
Yeah.
there's all of that. It's just so depressing that we are in this space because of some, I'm just going to say what I'm going to say, from a select group of insecure people.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
and I'll hit pause.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what's the quote is like, when you're accustomed to privilege, equality feels like oppression. So
Mm,
John,
Yes.
you said at the beginning, you don't get it. I don't get it either. Ref doesn't get it. Like, what is it that you feel is being taken away? And so we do need more allies like yourself, John, who can have the conversations because sometimes a person of color's voice is not as perceived as valuable. And so the more we can focus, we talk a lot about allyship with the Equity Council and in our sessions, and how, often we'll go into an organization and perhaps a leader that we're working with is trying to figure out how to like get a work group together, their diversity and inclusion work group, and they'll look to the staff of color to kind of
Right.
help lead the way, but they're kind of conflating creating a space for
mm,
people to feel psychologically safe and able to access, and yet they have to do all the work too. So there's
Right.
something in the middle of needing more allies. And then often white folks will be like, oh, that's not my space because I don't want to take space. So kind of helping folks navigate that is what we do and what the council does, where it's like we need everybody. We need everybody. And if anything, these groups are not trying to be exclusive. They're
Yeah.
actually trying to be inclusive spaces where you can have those challenging conversations.
Yeah. Yeah. And you started to touch on really where I want to take the rest of this conversation around self-care. Um, I have to admit, so I was mentioning in the pre-interview we were just chatting, you're in New York. I imagine these conversations are difficult anywhere, and New York's a fairly progressive state. You're a blue state. I'm in a very red state. I'm in one of the reddest of red states, and these conversations are, DEI is completely under attack. Higher education is under attack. Like we're one of those states where this is like it's like almost full on war over these topics.
Hmm.
And it's kind of nuts. And so I have to admit, like I feel like daily, I feel the just the weight, the burden, the exhaustion of it. Um, and I figure if I feel that as a white guy, um, how do others feel? You know, like how do people from these other marginalized groups and populations feel who live here? It's got to be just overwhelming um, for them, and so anyone trying to, you know, resist, to push back, to just create space for healthy conversations, it it does become a real challenge to maintain just positive energy and the self-care piece becomes more important than ever. So maybe you can talk to us about like what you suggest as you go into organizations, um, so that people can make sure that they're doing things in a sustainable way. Because the last thing we want is for people, really well-intentioned people, to just like burn themselves out and then all of a sudden, throw their hands in the air. I'm beating my head against the brick wall. I can't do it anymore. And then you lose your people, you lose your allies, you lose your the people that are trying to make the effort to make change.
The exciting thing about this work is that ultimately it's really rewarding. So getting involved with JEDI work for me was always something that I thought and felt deep in my soul was going to be something that I really wanted to be a part of, which is why I'm the co-chair, excuse me, of the Equity Council. But one of the things that I started prioritizing for myself especially coming into 2025, was self-care as a strategy. Because if I'm not fully present and if I can't stay centered, then there's a problem. There's a problem with my motivations. There's a problem with the way that I execute the
Yeah.
work that I know that I need to do. So I really like to hone in on like five key things. The first key thing for me, I'd like to share with those that of us around, especially in the Equity Council, think about setting boundaries and protecting your energy. If you think
Yeah.
about being intentional about that and how you want to engage so that you don't get sucked into the swirl of everything else, I think that's important. Um, Also having a really strong support team. Ultimately, who you surround yourselves with, allies and mentors, however, you want to build that support group, it's going to be important for you to stay in your lane and in your center. Also thinking about practicing restorative reflection. I think that's really one of those key things where we really want to take time to process the emotions that we're going through and the different kinds of experiences that we may have had with regard to this type of work. Um, and something that's really important, the fourth thing I like to talk about is like celebrating the small wins. Not everything has to be
Hmm.
gigantic. Not everything has to be overly exceptional, but just being able to say, I'm chipping away at this, and this small win is going to keep me moving forward. I love that idea because whatever can help us keep putting one foot in front of the other is what can help keep driving us in a world or in a society where people are always trying to tamp out your flame. And so the final thing I'd like to suggest is like thinking about engaging in joy and then rest, right? I
I
think
like
that's really
that. Yeah.
important. Resistance and change it requires some level of resilience. And so keeping that sense of making space for certain activities and that bring you joy, being able to reinforce your own sense of purpose and allowing yourself to recharge fully. Those are the things that I like to think about when I think about self-care.
How do you prioritize it? I think all five of those are excellent. I totally agree. I think we should be doing those. I have to admit, like I struggle personally with just prioritizing self-care, like prioritizing those types of elements. I have to admit, I like often feel guilty about it. Um, I just like there's so much work to be done. There's so much need. I have so much privilege. Like so many other people like have it so good, and so many people have so much need, and like I need to be doing more. And like I constantly I have that kind of running through my head, and it's hard for me to say, okay, no, I'm taking a break. I'm going to step back. I need to pause. How do you quiet that voice in your head enough so that you can actually like recharge, you know, because on the one hand, I don't want to completely quiet it, right? I want to have that drive. That drive is a good thing,
Yeah.
but I recognize that I can't run endlessly. Like I have to rest. I have to recharge.
Kavita, I'll let you interject, but I want to say one of the things that Kavita has like beaten into us, which I love, is like this idea of the suggestion of setting boundaries and protecting your energy. And I think that's where you start, and that's where you have to like it starts and ends there because you have to remember what are my boundaries, what are my boundaries, what are my boundaries, and how is this impacting me? And so I would
Mhm.
suggest my first priority is always my center.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But I also always want to remember, even though it was like fourth on my list, celebrating the small things, those things, because it will always get overwhelming. But if you can remember one step at a time, um, it'll keep you in a saner headspace than if you try to just do it all at once and not allow yourself to turn off, if you will.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so good. It's the celebration and the boundaries. I mean, the fact is, when we look at health outcomes, right? What is the number one leading cause of whatever disease we're going to talk about. It's stress.
Right.
Stress. And John, I am right where you are. I'm like, an Energizer bunny. I go, 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 go. I have a lot of privilege. I don't, I don't deserve, and not that I don't deserve it. I guess I don't think that way, but it's like I'm like, I've got the capacity, I've got the energy, I'm going to keep going. And yet, when you're doing JEDI work, DEI work, inclusion work, self-care isn't optional, right? It's
Yeah.
essential. It's essential. And, after partnering with all the organizations that we have and watching the council, which is just major plug here, they are all volunteer and they are amazing. So if I go to an event with them, it is self-care because I come home feeling, you find your people, you talk about the important things, we get some solutions to some things, and you're just in community. So just remembering that it's not optional, it's essential, right? Do your boundaries, as Raphael said, like it doesn't mean that you can just say not right now. You don't have to say no. It's hard for us to say no when you are a go, go, go person. So you just say not right now. Remember not to always say yes. I think you have to schedule it. I think that I've found that, right? Those things that fall off the list were never scheduled into your calendar. So whether it's the dance class that you've found or the morning meditation, I find that especially if you are a go-go, you probably have a calendar. So like scheduling really helps, but you have to develop rituals that replenish you. Otherwise, it will always feel like a slog. You have to
Mm.
be in community. I mean, this transformative change is what we're seeking, and it doesn't happen over weeks or even months. It's years. It's a lifelong commitment.
It's the long haul
Yeah,
for sure.
for
And
sure.
you will burn out if you don't recharge, and that's just the reality.
Yeah.
Well, Kavita and Raphael, this has just been a great conversation. I note the time. I'm sure we could go on for forever, but I also need to let you go and get on with your busy days. So, before we wrap things up, I just wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, where they can find out more about your work, your teams, the good work that you're doing, and then give us the final word for today.
Ladies first.
Thank you. Well, so my organization, we are continuing to do the good work. Even though, and even with our volatile name of Racial Equity Partners, we're not changing it. We're sticking to it. Because we think that if you can really figure out the issues with race and ethnicity and why it's so complicated here, that you can end up figuring out how to just appreciate all identity groups. So we're Racial Equity Partners, www.racialequitypartners.com. We're a consulting practice. I've got a team of about 5 consultants. We're small yet mighty. And we do organizational assessments, right? You can't figure out what your organization needs to do until you take a pulse on where you are. So we help you do assessments. We do lots of trainings. That's what we do with the council. We love doing trainings, give you time to have important conversations, coaching, all kinds of organizational development services. Yeah, so we'd love to read. And I think my final word would be just, when people understand how their specific actions, like every action you take, however small it is a step forward. And so
Mm.
don't ever think that it's too little. As long as you're doing something, it matters, right? Because however small, it really will contribute to meaningful transformation. And hopefully it helps you just continue to find the energy to persist. Because the work will continue and we're here to help make sure that it happens.
Love it. Love it. Raphael?
Equity Council. I'm Raphael Williams, co-chair of the Equity Council, and you can find me or reach out to me if you have any questions about the work that we're doing. We were founded in 2020, as I mentioned, to foster a stronger accountability towards creating more just environments and equitable workplaces. And so we work a lot with architects and designers and their clients to create environments that really celebrate this diversity, equity, and inclusion, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, and belonging, all the things in the workplace, because the built environment is really one of the most important things that we talk about, so that because we're always in one, right? And being able to create spaces that feel like you belong there is really important. You can reach me at Equity Council. That's all one word, Equity Council at IIDA New York, NY, IIDANY.org. And ask me any questions. One of the things that I really want to leave everyone with is like self-care as is a foundational element when we think about workplace in the community of equity. And that's not a luxury. It's really a necessity. And so it's going to be important for us to think about how we might take time to prioritize ourselves in self-care, because we know that in that you build this level of resilience, and things get a lot more clear, and your emotional capacity gets a little bit bigger so that you can keep that keep activated and keep your advocacy for inclusion and diversity, and all the inequities that I think we're all experiencing. But it allow us to create and foster a more meaningful change. So burnout is not something that we're looking forward to doing. So take time and prioritize yourself as an important entity to the success of your movement.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you both. This has just been a real pleasure. I encourage the audience to reach out, to get connected, find out more about what Kavita and Raphael can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week.